My partner and I, John Ellis, had always been passionate about trying to make a science fiction picture. And to try to make a science fiction picture back in the 80s was a huge undertaking.
Please welcome writer-director Philip Cook and producer John Ellis. Welcome to the show. Good to meet you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Philip. John, good to see you.
Good to see you.
So your film company is called Common Men
Motion Picture Corporation, yes.
And is it just the two of you?
We have two other partners, Pam Heft, to help do our financing, and another partner, a lawyer, Frank Reed.
It was shot all in Washington?
Shot entirely in Alexandria with all the effects work.
In a hidden warehouse.
66D, take one.
And we both had visual effects experience. And I hatched this scheme that we could make for what then was an incredibly ambitious picture and do it for a ridiculously low sum of money, which I think back then was like $114,000.
Beyond the Rising Moon was truly a product of the age when it was made. It had a lot of sensibilities of science fiction films from that era or close to it, like Silent Running or Blade Runner or 2001, where there's a lot of poetic imagery that was for the longest time sufficient for an audience to look at and appreciate.
Looking at it again now, 20 years after having made it and 10 years after having seen it the last time, it seems like it holds together pretty well.
I was 23 when I did the film. It was a great experience. People told me that I looked in my 30s, which is good because that's what most probably needed to be.
We built 26 sets with the help of Alan Hoyt, who was our set construction guru. He had his incredible building skills.
Once the ship was done, when you walked into it, it was a spaceship. It was completely self-enclosed.
Brickman's ship, the fact that you created this entire ship in this warehouse with the removable panels to accommodate camera angles and so on, I found incredibly impressive.
I mean, our whole set budget was like $6,000 or $8,000. The designer on the film was John Peretta, an incredibly talented artist that John Ellis had found. And he designed all the vehicles, the ship interiors. It was reminiscent of Ron Cobb, of Sid Mead. I mean, just beautiful illustrations. And Steve Hickman, a well-known fantasy artist, also designed the Tesseran alien spaceship. Beyond the Rising Moon stars Tracy Davis. Casting this picture, because it was a non-union film, was a bit of a challenge. I mean, our talent pool was pretty much limited to people who lived in the Washington, Virginia, Maryland area. And we put out notices in the newspaper and got a lot of interesting characters who showed up for that casting call. We eventually found Tracy through a mutual friend of ours. She had had a long-running role in One Life to Live, the soap opera up there.
That's a cop-out and you know it.
And she'd just come into the Washington market, and we were introduced, and we cast her as the lead. The other actor, who was a friend of mine, who was also in my other films, Hans Bachmann.
It's going to cost a lot of money.
Yeah?
Plays the role of Harold Brickman.
Been a lot worse off than this before.
He spends most of the film reacting and being buffeted around by the forces around him.
Rick Foucheux.
This will be something different from how to park your postal vehicle, which is what I was doing a lot of in those days.
Was going to play Thornton.
He was the good guy. He was the gentle guy. He was the intellectual one.
Take care of yourself, Brickman.
I thought that was fun to be the standout good guy and to be Pentan's refuge.
And Michael Mack.
Well, John Mosby is the second in command at Kiriyama Enterprises. I was in charge of the Pentan project, if you will. After all, I do present her to the members of the corporation. I'm one of her primary teachers.
The one thing that was really solid that we always could count on was the script. There weren't a lot of rewrites as we were doing the filming of it.
But the story really holds up, and the characters, and I can see in the acting a lot of commitment to the character and a lot of passion about what we were doing.
The lives of the characters are very believable. Someone has a beer, somebody smokes a cigarette. Just the fact that the characters stay so human and we're not in a perfect universe.
This is what impressed me about Phil's scripts, is that even in the most assertive, aggressive action moments, he's still writing human beings.
I wrote Beyond the Rising Moon in 1983. I was 23 years old. Back then it was titled Pentan, but it was deemed that it just wasn't a marketable enough title, and so we came up with Beyond the Rising Moon. For various reasons, the video people didn't think that was as dynamic a title, so then we renamed it Star Quest Beyond the Rising Moon, and that was the title that it debuted on the Sci-Fi Channel. But now the picture's been so reworked dramatically in so many different ways, I didn't feel that it really was Star Quest anymore. I mean, this film is radically different from its original incarnation.
I think the first one's focus was very cerebral and very art film. The new one is just like, this is a true adventure film.
There's a greater passion in the film. There is a sharper edge to the picture.
And now with the editing, I think it's developed these same scenes, but they now have a tension and a drive to it that just like on a roller coaster.
In this cut of the film, I cut to the chase. You know, I give you as much material as needed to get you to the next scene. And the editing pace of a feature made today is so much quicker than what was made back in the 80s. I mean, back then an average shot might be 7 seconds in a movie. Today an average shot in a movie is a second and a half. This was just sort of a way of revisiting this old material and honestly creating a whole new movie.
I feel that Star Quest and Outerworld are very, very different films.
It is a totally different film from the first one. I mean, the flavor of it, the way it looks, the way it plays, I mean, even the dialogue seems more contemporary. And it's amazing that it's all the same elements with just a few augmentations.
What I like about watching this new cut of the film is the way it shows the director's art in the midst of the action-packed, moment-to-moment plot points. There was also great effort on Phil's part to have us understand where we fit into the story and where we were at every moment.
All the storyboards that were made available to us so we could just get a sense of how the real world that we're living in is then going to intercut with this other world that is being created that we won't see till it's on film. No, I did not envision just how this picture would grow in scope. With different scenes being re-edited, the relationships become a lot clearer, that all of these different characters have their own agendas. What's unspoken becomes more important now with the new look of the film.
Scene 252 to 258, A1. Take one. Oh my God. Come on.
There was a real camaraderie between everybody working on either side of the camera. Sometimes the filming in this warehouse was brutal because there were the summer months and everybody was sweating bullets. I stood up and I promptly went through the windshield of the cockpit. And Phil said, "There's this one scene that's coming up where you're going to do a lot of running." Still remember I was blowing so many takes because as I was running I was just like going, ow, ooh, ah.
No, it was basically me as a cameraman. I had a camera assistant. And I did all the lighting myself. We didn't have any grips, we didn't have any gaffers. God, I'm not even sure how we fed the crew. I know we did. After we completed the live action, the crew was basically down to myself, John Ellis, and Norman Gagnon. And, you know, we continued to build miniatures in this warehouse through the winter and through the summer. And, you know, this warehouse was not heated and it was not air conditioned, so we built like a little bunker out of pieces of the spaceship sets. And we basically made a workshop, which you had to enter by sliding through an airlock device. And this little workshop, we heated with space heaters so that at least we could be warm while we constructed, you know, all these miniatures of all these different scales. I mean, we built little versions of Brickman's ship, medium-sized versions of Brickman's ship. The largest was almost 6 feet long with functioning landing gear.
The magic that he was able to do with models and miniatures and things like that, it was just phenomenal.
The trick about these models is since everything was done in camera, they had to be light enough that we could fly them with wire rigs for the landing and takeoff shots. We did go on location twice in the production of the film. One was to a tunnel next to the Pentagon. And we rented a generator and we put in our own light fixtures into this tunnel and got permission from the Pentagon security. And on that night, of course, they showed up. They had no idea who we were. We didn't have a copy of the permit, but fortunately they let us finish the film.
And they scoped out this really cool location out in Culpeper, Virginia, which was a cornfield that had been tilled over once.
319A, take 4.
Plenty of times where Brickman and Pentan and everybody were on their hands and knees pulling corn husks out of the ground so we could film in a different location. There was nothing to do between takes except sit on the dirt and kind of wait for the next shot to be set up. I remember we were in these jumpsuits, so it was incredibly hot inside of it. So in between takes, I'd peel it off and I'd just be in my underwear and my t-shirt. And at that particular moment, I think I decided to have a squirt gun fight with Norm, and we were chasing each other all around the area, acting like complete idiots.
7291 test.
My name is Norman Gagnon.
I called up my old friend Norman Gagnon.
I'm a set designer, builder. What, louder?
25 years later, and I says, "Hey Norman, do you think you could still fit in the old stormtrooper costumes, which I've had in my shed in the storage room for 20-some years?" And we got together, and he sort of stuffed himself back into these things, and we rented a green screen stage and photographed Norman walking around as a stormtrooper on green screen. I put in these moving stormtroopers through all these different backgrounds now, and basically allowed me to jettison these very poor composites that we did so long ago. Another addition in this version of the DVD was the creation of the asteroid battle. In the original version, the big finale took place in space around the Promethean. But back then, because of the limitations of how we would do visual effects, the spaceships pretty much flew in a pretty barren star field. But once I created digital versions or 3D models of all these spaceships, I thought, you know, what's the most kinetic, visually dynamic environment I could have this battle take place in? I thought, you know, what if Elysium has rings now? It didn't have rings in the original version. And what if Pentand leads the Toll Wars into this just landscape of boulders tumbling? It was just a much more visually dynamic scene to take place. Not only you're trying to kill each other, you're also trying to dodge these tons of rocks which are floating all over the place. Another addition in the version of the DVD that you're looking at now was the destruction of Sky House.
We don't just kill the man. We destroy his entire compound while he's in it.
Now, this would be a really cool thing to see in the film.
Which was a surprise to me, by the way, that Thornton gets it. I think it's a good addition to the film.
These are not just savvy business guys. These are ruthless business guys.
One of the biggest improvements in this version of the DVD was the destruction of the Promethean, which I have to tell you, back then, our effects were very limited. It was pretty weak. I mean, there were a lot of great effects in the film, but this one, quite frankly, sucked. And it was an embarrassment, and has been an embarrassment for 20 years. And I finally did justice to it with the digital recreation of the Promethean and the explosion. And now when the Promethean goes, it's pretty cool. It's a great explosion of the starship. I like to think we took the best of the effects from the 80s, these beautiful miniatures that we had constructed, and some of the really cool dynamic things that we had done, and jettisoned a lot of the crappy effects of the 80s and replaced them with some of the newer technology. And I think you sort of get a hybrid of the best of both techniques. I guess one of the things that's always driven me in the films that I've made is there's so much about the art and the design and the look of these pictures. And for micro-budgeted films, of which everything I've done, I mean, Despiser and Invader, I mean, these are just ridiculously small amounts of money. When you compare with what most people were making as independent films, they were making slashers. I mean, we never wanted to make those kinds of films. I mean, our films were always as much about the story as they were about, we just wanted to visit and create these very cool environments. We wanted to build spaceships. I've got that out of my system. I don't think I'll ever build a spaceship again. Yes, the roots of Beyond the Horizon Moon exist in Outerworld, but to see the two pictures side by side, it's a profoundly different viewing experience. And I think, in retrospect, a much more successful one.